Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for Pinkfresh Studio. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing this slimline card which features the brand new You Are My Favorite stamps, dies, and coordinating stencils from the October 2020 release. And I absolutely love the way that these products work together, and the stencils make coloring this image an absolute breeze. It would take me forever with Copic markers or another coloring medium, but I'm going to tell you these stencils make it a snap. Now, before I get into the actual stamping and die cutting and coloring of this image, I'm going to show you how I create my slimline card base. So I have some Neenah Solar White Heavyweight cardstock here, and I'm cutting it down to 7 1/4 by 8 5/8. And this is going to give me a finished card base that measures 8 5/8 by 3 5/8. I'm going to put this back into my trimmer, and I'm actually going to use the rail of my trimmer to make my score line along this edge here. And I've just put my cardstock in there, and I'm measuring out 3 5/8 inches, scoring along that edge, and then I'm creasing that fold with my bone folder. And this gives me, like I mentioned, a card that measures 8 5/8 by 3 5/8. Now, if you don't want to deal with the 1/8 inch marks, you could definitely reduce this down to 8 1/2 by 3 1/2, and that might make the measuring process a little bit easier. You would just cut your cardstock then to 7 inches by 8 1/2 inches and score it 3 1/2 inches. Now for the card front, I'm actually going to cut my cardstock down to 8 3/8 inches by 3 3/8 inches, and that will give me a perfect nested card front. Now, of course, you could cut this down a little bit more if you wanted more of an outline or a trim around your card front and your card base, but this allows me to get 3 out of this one piece of cardstock. So I have 3 card fronts out of this one piece of cardstock and a little bit left over. So now that I've shown you how I'm creating my card front and my card base, I'm going to show you my color palette. Now, this is not the complete finished color palette. I wanted to start out with something that I felt was really Christmassy. And so I am using all of these colors, and you can see how they make a really beautiful Christmas palette. But to change this up a little bit, I'm going to take that same color palette and add a little navy to it, and it's going to give me a beautiful year-round color palette to use. Now, I shared a card project over on my blog featuring that Christmassy color palette and a beautiful stenciled background. So if you want to check that out, you can head on over to my blog for that. For now, I am prepping the surface of my You Are My Favorite stamp, this very large, beautiful floral image, by kind of wiping it with a microfiber cloth. It is a brand new stamp, and in order to get it to stamp really nicely on my first try, I'm just going to kind of rub the surface of it. You could do it with your hand as well. And then I'm going to ink it up using some detail black ink here, and then stamp it onto a piece of Neenah Solar White. And once again, I'm using the heavyweight cardstock because I really like my cards to have a lot of weight to them. Now I'm using my MISTI to stamp this image, and I did ink it up a couple of times and stamp it a couple of layers of ink just to make sure I have a really nice dark rich black outline. And then I am using the magnets from my MISTIs to hold this onto my work surface. I am working on a magnetic cutting mat, so this allows me to just use those magnets to hold my projects in place directly on my mat. And the stencils are going to protect my work area from getting the ink kind of over onto the actual cutting mat itself, so I'm not really worried about that. Otherwise, I would bring in like a Teflon craft mat or something like that. Now I've gone ahead and lined up the first stencil that I'll be using, and that is the leaf stencil area. So I am starting with 2 colors of green inks from Pinkfresh Studio. I'm starting with the olive as my lighter color, and then I'm going to hit the base areas of these leaves with a little bit of evergreen to give it a little bit of depth. And you can actually use one color of ink to create your different various shades of green. But I thought bringing in a little bit of this more of a blue-green would be really beautiful and kind of add a lot of depth to these leaves. And you can see my stencil looks like a hot mess, but when I remove it, the ink blending looks absolutely beautiful. So now I have my floral stencil lined up, and I'm starting with Ballet Slipper, and I'm going to allow the outer smaller florals to just have a couple colors of ink on them. And then those larger florals towards the center, those will have more variation in the ink colors. So I started with Ballet Slipper. Now I'm moving into Coral Reef, and then I will bring in Passion Fruit. Now keep in mind that these stencils do kind of have an artsy flair, so there are some areas where they do not line up perfectly. It kind of gives you that over-colored look, but it's absolutely beautiful and so easy to color these images with the coordinating stencils. Now, I also wanted to mention I am using magnets to hold my stencils in place because I'm working on that magnetic surface. But you could also use some Post-it tape to keep your stencils in place or some pixie spray. So just kind of keep that in mind and use whatever your preference is. If you don't have a magnetic cutting mat, though, I did want to mention that there are other ways to keep your stencils in place. So you just saw me there do my detail ink blending, and I brought in Passion Fruit and Candy Apple, and then I went back to my larger floral stencil and kind of blended those out just a little bit. And this is my finished colored image. It took like no time to create this variation in color, and it's absolutely beautiful. It would have taken me forever with markers to do this. So now I'm taking the coordinating die and I'm holding it in place with a little bit of purple tape and running that through my die cut machine to die cut my image. And here is where we're going to get a little bit crazy. I decided I wanted to bring in some navy and place this onto a navy card front. But I really wanted it to look like I created this on navy cardstock. So I am taking the B99 Copic sketch marker, and I am going to color all the white areas of this die cut. So I'm just going very slow around this stamped and stenciled image, and I'm just filling in all the white areas with this blue ink. Now keep in mind, because the stencil itself is not giving you that perfect edge on some of these florals, you have a little bit of grace when you do this. So if you mess up a little bit, don't worry about it. Just kind of go for it and go real slow, and you will be happy with the results. So you can see I'm just finishing up this coloring of the background here, and look how beautiful that turned out. I've never tried this technique before, but it's something I've always wanted to do, and I'm so pleased with the way this image turned out. So I'm going to place this onto this navy card front. So it's cut to 8 3/8 by 3 3/8. And like I said before, if you wanted to kind of round things out, you could do 8 1/4 by 3 1/4, and it would be just a slight bit different. But I wanted it to look like there was almost like a glow coming from behind this image. So I'm taking some white pigment ink and I'm blending it onto the background. It's going to look like a hot mess here for a second. But don't worry, my image, my die cut floral image, is going to cover the majority of this blending, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I just kind of wanted to have a little variation in the background. So once I blended that on, I went ahead and took my microfiber cloth and kind of buffed out some of the areas. And then I am going to position my stamped and die cut image right over the top. Now, I wanted it to have some dimension, but I really wasn't feeling the whole foam adhesive thing. I wanted that kind of really thick look that layering up multiple die cut images gives you. It gives you this really sturdy, kind of solid look from the side and very clean look from the side. So I die cut 3 of this floral image out of plain white cardstock, and I am stacking them up using a little bit of liquid adhesive. Now I'm taking my time to make sure I line this up well, but in the end, you're gonna see that I kind of didn't do a great job. But I'm gonna show you how I fix that. So I have 3 layers of the plain white cardstock. And once I have those stacked up, I'm going to add some more liquid glue, and I am going to place my colored and die cut image on top. Now, because I'm working on a white background, I did not notice a couple of areas where I didn't get this perfectly lined up. And so there was a bit of the white die cuts showing underneath when I looked directly down on this. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to my card front, and you're going to see there's a couple areas where it's like really white around the edge in that lower kind of right hand corner where that medium-sized flower is, you're going to see those white die cuts kind of peeking out. And that was really bothering me because it didn't have like a really clean look. So I just took my B99 Copic marker that I colored the background with, and I went into some of those areas where I hadn't lined up the die cuts perfectly, and I just colored over that area to take away that white halo effect that I had gotten from not lining things up perfectly. I mean, let's be honest, at this point, there was no way I was scrapping this card. I was too far in, so I had to find a fix, and that worked just fine. Now, I used this Just a Reminder, I Love You sentiment. This is also from the You Are My Favorite stamp set. I heat embossed that using white embossing powder onto some navy cardstock, and I layered that up with just a simple vellum circle and placed that sentiment right over the top. It kind of brings a little bit of attention to that area, but without taking away from my floral image too much. And I placed that on there with some foam adhesive, and that finishes up my card for today. Oh, I did mount it on a card base as well. So that finishes up my card for today, featuring the brand new You Are My Favorite stamps, dies, and stencils from Pinkfresh Studio. I absolutely love the way this card turned out. I think it is so much fun to take that stamped, colored, and die cut image and add that dark background to it. It really makes the colors pop. I hope you enjoyed this card project, and I hope you will consider giving this background technique a try. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in this project in the description at YouTube, so check there if you're looking for something specific. And as always, thanks so much for stopping by and watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on the Pinkfresh YouTube channel so you won't miss any of our card making and paper crafting tutorials. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.